Hey everybody, happy Friday morning all across North America. My name is Ian Hill. This is Leadership in Changing Times. This is the Director's Check, Becoming a Community Builder. We're about halfway through. Are we halfway through? We might be over halfway through. I don't know if I like this shirt. Anyways, we might be over halfway through the program. How far are we? 1, 2, 3, 6. Yeah, well, getting close to halfway. Getting close to halfway in the program. And we're about to introduce today the next competency, catalyst for responsibility. The last 3 weeks we've been talking about big picture, holistic systems thinking. And I am going to put on the website a video about time. Right now your emerging leaders are going through a week's worth of discussion around time and maximizing the utilization of their time. How to organize themselves, how to focus themselves, and how to make the most of that perishable commodity called time. We've boiled that down to about a 30-minute video that I'll put on there for you, and I'll also put a link to it in Monday morning's email, just so that you have the information as well. And if you want to drill down into it further, you can. In the last 3 weeks, this whole concept of systems thinking, this idea that you need to have force multipliers at your disposal, systems, if you will, that allow you to get more done with less. And by way of example, we gave you some systems. Like in the coaching session, we talked about a system for gathering thoughts, ideas, and concerns. Systems. Now that we have that systems thinking as a basis, we're going to talk about more systems this 3 weeks, but within the context of how do I get other people to do more than they were doing the day before and be happy about it? How do I get them to be how do I become a catalyst to get other people to take greater responsibility? And in that, we do have to think in terms of systems. Remember the whole thing with Archimedes. Archimedes said that, give me a place to stand and I will move the world. What he was really saying was that his fulcrum and lever were a force multiplier that allowed him to do a lot more than he had the personal capacity to do. This idea, this systems idea, when combined with this the truism that I can choose the systems I deploy, and I can choose the systems that would be most effective and relevant in a given time, should give me tremendous confidence that I can do just about anything if I have the right system. So I concur with Archimedes. I'm sure he's happy to hear that I'm on board. Old Archimedes is up there saying, wow, Ian Hill's on board. I made it. So old Archimedes, validated by Ian, is saying, wow, that's awesome. So I concur with Archimedes. Give me a place to stand, and I will move the world, because I'll deploy the appropriate system for the appropriate time. And we made the point that the whole world's a system anyways. And whether it's your body, the thermostat, the sun, the moon, the earth, whether it's predator and prey, whether it's social systems, that it was going to be the systems thinker that rules the 21st century. Now we move into the next competency. And interestingly enough, we will talk about some systems, but they will be in the context of how do I get other people to take on more responsibility. I think I mentioned to you before that for me, I've always been in a position where I was leading people that either knew more than me, were older than me, had more experience than me, were more talented than me. I was, in everything that I've ever done, I've had little knowledge for the task I was either given or had selected. I had little experience for the task I was given or I had chosen to do. Or I had little depth or breadth of formal education. but I was still given the responsibility to lead people that knew more than me. And it was a daunting task. And in each one of those situations, I realized that I didn't have to be great at things. I just needed the people who were great at things to take greater responsibility. How could I get that young man to give a little bit more when I was coaching on the high school and college level? How could I get those employees to give a little bit more when no one was watching, when no one was around? Well, there's some systems that I could deploy to help them do so. And then today, how do I get, in our philanthropic endeavors around the world, how do I get local community members? How can I be a catalyst to get local community members to take greater ownership of their community than they did the day before? Dilemma. But again, I turn to history. Oh, Ian, you in the history lessons. Yeah. Turn to history to look for examples. So although not a formally educated man, you can be self-educated, and you can look to history for some examples. And as I did an exploration of history, and I looked at the greatest communities in the history of mankind, most historians pointed to one community. Most historians pointed to a 30-year period in that one community. And they said this was a special place. This was a place that was a transformational point, a moment in time that took human race on a whole different trajectory. That community, Athens. That time, the Golden Age. The leader thereof, a guy named Pericles. And it was Pericles that taught me that you could be a leader who was in command but not necessarily in control. By way of background, Pericles was a statesman, a general, a business person, a community member, and a community leader. He lived in a place called Athens, and at the time, Athens was a true democracy. Every citizen, let's qualify that, land-owning male, land-owning male, that was a citizen. But okay, within the context of the time, every land-owning male got to vote on everything. It was a true democracy. And there were 10 guys that ran the show. But those 10 guys all had equal authority. Now, there was no political machines. There was no political parties. And this guy, Pericles, didn't have any more authority than anyone else of the 10. But somehow he marshaled the human capital of the citizenry of Athens. In that 30-year time frame came the arts and culture that we know today. In that 30-year time frame came democracy, or the birthplace of the republic that we have today, on both sides of the North American border. In that time came geometry and mathematics that we have today. And the Western civilization that we have today, the genesis of it was that 30-day period, or 30-year period, where Pericles controlled, where Pericles led. So what can Pericles teach us about being a catalyst for responsibility? What he teaches me is, first of all, I don't need to be in control of everything. I just need to be in command. I don't need to do it all. I just need to provide direction. And I need to understand the human behavior and call people to their best. That's what Pericles did. Kagan, the great author, outlines in this little snippet that I threw on your handout some thoughts on Pericles. Pericles was one of those extraordinary people who placed his own stamp on his time and shaped the course of history. He was a leading citizen of a great democracy that had a keen sense of its own special role in history and special excellence of its constitution and way of life. It had a booming economy, producing wealth and prosperity previously unknown. The life of Pericles, the democratic society he led, indeed have much to teach the citizens of free lands in our own time. Now, I won't read it all, but I will point a couple of thoughts. Pericles possessed no private personal fortune. The citizen of a democratic republic, he held no office higher than that of general, one of 10, none of whom had greater formal powers than any of the others. Unlike the presidents and prime ministers of modern representative democracies, he had no well-established, well-organized political machinery on which to rely. So then what did he have? You know what he had? He had the power of his vision. He had the capacity to articulate. He had the ability to marshal human capital. He could tap into the collective intelligence of the citizenry. And he painted a vision of what Athens could be. And people rose to the occasion. I think this is interesting. Let me find it really quick. He commissioned the first city planner. He was a catalyst for the arts, and certainly the economy that they created in that 30-year period was, in today's day and age, probably would be the top economy in the world, if you will. Listen to this. Tyrants and dictators can rely on mercenaries and compulsion to defend their states. Rare states like Sparta, a closed authoritarian society, could inoculate in their people a willingness to renounce their private lives almost entirely. But democracies cannot use such devices. Instead, democratic leadership involves a freer kind of public education. Pericles sought to teach the Athenians that their own interests were tied together with those of their community, and that they could not secure or prosper unless their state was secure and prosper, and that the ordinary man could achieve greatness only through the greatness of his society. You say, well, what does all of this have to do with my workplace? You're Pericles. Because in today's day and age, that authoritarian Sparta-like approach to leadership will be fundamentally rejected. In today's day and age, it takes a freer kind of leadership, as Kagan said about Pericles. That it takes today, in my opinion, helping people understand the deep and compelling why of their role. To help them understand and see how their goals, their dreams, are deeply intertwined with the goals and aspirations of your organization. Ian, all of this euphoric talk will not work. We haven't had a raise in 4 years. All the more reason to tie people to the intangible and the value of their work. A catalyst for responsibility understands the human dynamic. They have the ability to see past what is, and they have the ability to see what could be, and then create systems and processes, human-based systems and processes, to ensure that people take greater ownership than they did the day before. It takes a special skill, that community builder. Pericles was the first, if you will, community builder that I have found. And then after him came many, many more. So what about you? How do you get people to take greater responsibility than they did the day before? How do you get them to do more with less and like it? Do you take that Sparta-like approach, or are you taking more of that Pericles approach? And isn't it interesting, as we move forward throughout history, this is a more global comment, as we move forward throughout history, we see the continual battle of the Spartan and the Athenian. It is pretty crazy. An authoritarian leadership style or a freer leadership style. It's funny. It's a constant yin and yang all throughout history. And whether that's governments or whether that's a director of a department, which one are you? I think the times require more of a Periclean approach to leadership. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about being a catalyst for responsibility. So, what's the definition? Well, the competency is catalyst for responsibility. The definition: today's leader places a priority on engaging and cultivating ownership and responsibility in their workplace. How can I engage and cultivate a deeper sense of ownership? Am I going to do that by being an authoritarian or a Periclean approach? So let's quickly go through, as we always do in our last 2 times together, let's quickly go through the self-survey. Okay, let's go through it very quickly. I'm a 1, I'm nothing like that. 10, I'm always like that. I'm just going to read them randomly. You take the test, or you take the survey. I believe I have a responsibility to my employees, organization, and community. And people, you'd say, that's trite. I mean, what? It's so self-evident. A lot of people don't believe they have a responsibility to their community. A lot of people don't believe they have a responsibility to their organization or their employees. This is where that life's 5 most urgent questions come into play. What would be my greatest contribution to my family? What would be my greatest contribution to those that I serve? What would be my greatest contribution to those that I've led? What would be my greatest contribution to my organization? What would be my greatest contribution to my society? How many people do you know that are just sucking off of society? And I don't mean they're not tax-paying citizens. Oh, Ian, you're going to go on a rant. I'm not going to go on a rant. I'm just asking you a question. How many people do you know that aren't making a significant contribution to society? They're going through the motions. One of the reasons that Athens was great in that 30-year period was because there was no passengers on the ship called Athens. There can't be any passengers on the ship called a free society. Everybody's got to grab an oar and row at some level to some degree. Everyone's got to be a contributor to some level or some degree. Now, the funny thing is, how do I get people to do that? That's the challenge. How do so we all say, oh yeah, everybody's got to contribute. But how do I get a human being to contribute? Do I compel them by law to contribute? Or is there some other way? Now take that within the 4 walls of your department. You have policies, you have procedures, you have protocols. You have a manual this big, a third-party representation agreement, a manual this big that compels people to do work in a certain way. And yet many, many people aren't satisfied with the product that they get, the performance that they get. Why is that? Because we don't have systems in place to be a catalyst for responsibility. How do I get a human being to take greater responsibility? Well, it starts with me first role modeling. I had a guy tell me one time, Ian, I want you to start following the 10-foot rule. The 10-foot rule? Yeah, if it's within 10 feet of you, you're responsible for it. One of you guys sent me an email the other day. You asked me, why you do all these projects? Why you do all these playground projects? Why you do all these skate projects? Why you do all these community projects? And you're a volunteer for all of them. You know why? Because the world's a direct reflection of me. How in the world am I going to sleep at night knowing that you got kids that have no safe place to play? That's not right. Someone's got to do something about that. Oh, I can't take on every challenge, Ian, can I? No, you can't take on every challenge. But someone's got to take responsibility. Someone's got to be willing to say, I'll fix that. You don't just get up in the morning and go through life and think that everybody else will take care of everything. Now, I know to an extent I'm preaching to the choir. You wouldn't be in the role that you're in if you didn't get this. The challenge is, how do we get other people to get it? And how do we do it in such a way that they're happy about it? The world's a direct reflection of me. If there's kids hungry, that's a direct reflection of me. If there's a woman that gets beaten on Wednesday nights because her husband comes home drunk, that's a direct reflection of me. My society is a direct reflection of me. Well, that's too big. That's too much, Ian. That's zealous. Okay, great. But out of that zeal has come 3 schools. Out of that zeal has come 160 projects across North America. Out of that zeal, that desire that says that the community is a direct reflection of me. I'm only using me as an example. You're probably the same way to some degree. Probably. You wouldn't be in the leadership position you are if you didn't feel that way. So don't walk past the first one. Do you really believe in the depth of your heart that you have a responsibility to your employees, you have a responsibility to your organization, and a responsibility to your community? In the depth of your heart? I believe that others are capable and have a right to make decisions that affect their situation. Do you also then believe that others have responsibility and have a right to act on that responsibility? I believe that each person has knowledge, experience, and skill that can strengthen a team. See, here's the funny thing. In a moment when we start talking about delegation, do you believe that other people have skill and ability and can walk it out? I can apply a catalyst approach for my work within the department I lead. A catalyst approach. What does that mean? That means I don't do everything. That means I can't possibly do everything. So the systems that I set up have to be catalytic in nature. They get it started, they establish it, and then it runs. And then we maintain that system. And we keep continually checking if it's effective and relevant. If it's not, we adjust it. And I'm just going through these randomly. I understand that pride is a powerful form of human capital. Not this week, but the following week, we're going to talk for 5 days about pride and using pride as a performance management tool. Pride. You know, you stop and think about this thing called pride. We worry about rules. We worry about rules, and I don't have a problem with that. But should we be spending time on compelling people to do things, or should we be spending time on just developing pride, and then people will do things? That's what Pericles did. I'm not saying there weren't laws in Athens, but I'm saying he spent his time building Athenian pride. That's why he built those buildings on the top of the Acropolis. And any of you that know anything, you know that was the first public works project of any significant scale. The people that built that didn't know what they were doing. They were trained, and then they got up there and built that. Because there was so much money coming in tribute to Athens, he had to put people to work. And what's crazy about that, that means those buildings that are still standing today were not built by skilled craftsmen. That's nuts. They were built by Athenians that took great pride in their community. Think about that. You know pride is a powerful tool. So should I focus on building rules, or should I focus as the executive leader on building pride? Well, how do I do that? We're going to talk about that. I have a system in place for communicating what winning is for our department and celebrating people's achievement. Do people in your department feel like they're winners, or are they just going through the grind of life? Think about how many people we know that are like this. Well, I got 2 more days to go to the weekend, if it's Wednesday, right? 2 more days to go. Or I got 734 more days to go till I retire. They're just going through the motions of life. They're trading time for money. Well, as soon as you have a department where 25, 30, 40% of the people are just trading time for money, you're not going to have excellence. Of course not. So it seems to me it's incumbent. What I learned from Pericles was I'm responsible for creating that environment where people can thrive. I'm responsible for creating the environment where there's deep pride. Not only pride in the workplace, but pride in the individual. I'm responsible as the executive leader to create that culture. I understand that it takes what it takes to get buy-in, which is the first step to what I'm talking about. I have effective tools to mobilize human resources to get things done through others. I'm an effective delegator. I have a system of delegation. I can teach effective delegation. Now, here's the funny thing. You say you're a great delegator? That doesn't matter. What matters is your mid-level leader or your frontline supervisor a great delegator? Delegation is key to being a catalyst for responsibility, and delegation is a key today. So does your department have a process and system for effective delegation? And are you teaching effective delegation all the way down the chain of command? Why? Because it's like water and electricity. Right? At the head end of some source of water, it comes out like a torrent. And as it goes through pipes, and as there's little impediments, little blockage here, little hairball there, I don't know why I said that, little hairball there, little sewage here, whatever, whatever. As it goes through the pipe, there's little impediments. And by the time it gets down to the end, it's just a drip. The valves need to be opened all the way up, and everything needs to be clear. If that's the case, that water is going to come rushing out at the other end. So for you and I, what's that valve? Effective delegation. Effective delegation is that valve, man. But and we'll talk about it in depth in a moment. But I want you to be thinking in terms, not only are you a good delegator, but are you teaching a system? Does Nashua have a system for effective delegation? Does Stillwater have, hold on one second, does Stillwater have a system for effective delegation? Does Trinity have a system for effective delegation? Our way that we teach and learn delegation, that's the key. Margie, do you have something for me?
I have a question.
Yes. I don't want to take a question, but go ahead.
How do we get an employee group to recognize that we will only celebrate when they go above and beyond their normal job duties?
We'll talk about that in a second.
Oh.
We'll talk about that a little bit today, but we'll talk about that over the next 3 weeks for sure. Because pride starts with expectation. Pride starts with expectation. So somewhere along the way, and here, I'm pushing this back on you. Somewhere along the way, you stop clarifying what excellence looks like. Because remember, there's 3 reasons why employees don't perform. They don't know the expectation, they don't have the tools or training, or they think they have a choice. Now, your mid-level leaders just went through this discussion. But if a employee stakeholder group, if a stakeholder group is saying, well, how come we can't celebrate every little thing we do? How come we can't celebrate below standard performance or standard performance? Someone along the way was not reinforcing what excellence looked like. Now you've got to step back in and reinforce what excellence looks like. And then when they are excellent, you celebrate. Now, not today, but in that 4 days that we talk about building pride, we will talk specifically about this. Because it's not about rewards. It's about building pride. Pride in what they do and the importance thereof, and are they any good at it? So I'm not a big believer in incentive programs. I'm not a big believer in rewards or recognition per se. However, I am a big believer in establishing standards, and when we go over the standard, we celebrate. Whatever the standard is, industry standard, departmental standard, whatever the standard is, every time we go over the standard, we celebrate. Now, that doesn't have to be a pizza party. That could just be a handshake and well done. So I understand your point. Everybody wants a trophy. But I would suggest to you it's executive leadership that let that happen. It's not the employee's fault. It's not the employee's fault. Right, Jeff? Deming was right. 85% of the problem is usually leadership. So somewhere along the way, some leaders let that occur. But we'll talk about that when we talk about pride. Good question, actually. Very good question. And it'll be answered very specifically when we take, not next week, but the following week, and we walk out 5 days or 4 days of talking about pride. So, to be a catalyst for responsibility, over the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about 3 things. We're going to talk about how do I get buy-in, we're going to talk about delegation, and then we'll start to plant the seeds of this discussion around pride. So, that's what we're going to do over the next 3 weeks. For the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about those 3 things as an example of how I can be a catalyst for responsibility. I got to understand how to get buy-in from people. I have to be an effective delegator, and my department has to be great at delegating. And then I got to know how to build pride, both organizational pride and individual pride, and have a strategy for doing so. Except for love, there is no more powerful, there is no more effective or powerful form of human capital than pride. Love, then pride. If I can engage pride in my workplace, people are sick less, they come more, they come up with creative ideas, there's less stress in the workplace. If I can build individual and organizational pride, which is different than arrogance, but we'll talk about that in a few seconds. All right, turn the page. I want to talk about buy-in. How do I, we always get this discussion about how do I get somebody to buy in? How do we get buy-in? How do we get citizens to buy in? Pericles got Athens to buy in. Buy into his vision, buy into his direction, buy into where he was going. He had no authority. He couldn't compel them by law. He couldn't put a gun to their head, figuratively speaking. Well, because there was no guns. He couldn't put a Hippolyte sword or spear to their head. Hippolyte. I like that. What are you? I'm a Hippolyte. Anyhow, 300 Spartans. Anywho, so he didn't have that. So how did he get them to buy in? I wanted to learn that. I wanted to find out. What did it take to get somebody to buy in? I came across the work of Dr. Ludwig at the University of Texas. And Dr. Ludwig said there was really 3 things that would get somebody to buy in. From now on, I want you to be the buy-in police for your department. I want you to ask yourself some very simple questions before you start any new initiative, before you try to roll out any new thing, policy, procedure, whatever, new vision, whatever it might be. I want you to ask yourself the 3 buy-in questions. Because Dr. Ludwig said, and I concur, again, the smartest minds in the world are so happy that I'm concurring with them. Dr. Ludwig said, and I concur, that there was 3 keys, 3 building blocks to buy in. Let's go through them. He said, first of all, relevant. Relevance. If an individual doesn't believe that the thing you're going to do is relevant to them personally, then at minimum they're going to be indifferent. Whatever. At maximum they're going to be opposed. That's not relevant to me, and you want to jack up my life. I don't want anything to do with that. So we have to say to ourselves, is what we're going to do relevant? Or how are we going to explain the relevance? How are we going to articulate how that stakeholder group, that this is relevant? It's not enough just to say, hey everybody, this is relevant to you. Pay attention. Snap, snap. This is relevant to you. You got to walk over to their side of the fence and look at it and go, oh yeah, that's relevant to us. And whether that's me putting in a new road and getting some people's land and the public outcry in the public meeting, I got to show the relevance to them personally, or whether that's explaining to citizenry the condition of the pipes that are in the ground that no one can see and money having to be spent on it in a time where people don't want to spend money. I got to be able to show the relevance to people. The county sheriff does a pretty dang good job of explaining relevance when they talk about cutting his budget. Doesn't he? Or she? He or she? Yeah. Somehow they get people to think it's relevant, so they buy in. Okay, fine. Don't cut that budget. Relevance. So from now on, moving forward, you have to ask yourself, how am I going to explain the relevance of this thing to them? And you do that before you begin. Secondly, quality. Quality? Yeah, people won't buy into something they think is a joke. People won't buy into something that they've known in the past to be a failure. People won't buy into something that they think is going to be a loser. Why? Because people don't want to align themselves with something that will fail or that they perceive will fail. So if we have a track record of rolling things out that aren't so hot, why am I going to buy in? Now listen, I didn't say people wouldn't come to work. They come to work because they know if they're out of a job, they can't pay their mortgage. People come to work. It's how do I get their best? If I've had a track record of us not doing things very well every once in a while, I gotta acknowledge that. Hey everybody, I know you might be reluctant to buy in because the last time we rolled something out, it wasn't so hot. But here's the difference and here's the changes that we've made. So you just acknowledge it. You just acknowledge it. And you say, this is what we're doing to be better. Because I guarantee you this, if the perception is that the change or the thing you want to implement is going to be of low or poor quality, they absolutely will not buy in. So you better be able to explain the quality. And then finally, impact. We have to be able to draw in a dark line the impact to that stakeholder group and the impact to that individual. Now the impact may be positive. This is the positive impact if we do this. Oh, it's going to take a lot of work, but on the other side, here's the positive impact. Or here's the ramifications of us not doing that. Your quality of work or your quality of life experience, whatever, is going to be diminished if we don't make this change. So before I go into the conversation with the stakeholder group, I have buy-in strategies in place before I ever enter into attempting to roll anything out. Now, at minimum, if you started thinking these thoughts, yeah, how are we going to make sure that it sounds relevant to them? Or, yeah, how are we doing on equality? Do people think what we do is equality? Do the people think what we do is equality? How about impact? How am I going to be able to explain and show the impact of this? Instead of just walking in and saying, we're changing. All of a sudden, I start to think in proactive terms that give me a greater likelihood of gaining buy-in. Gaining buy-in. I think that when building trust, this is a way to build trust. Because I think these things through before I go and sit down and talk. You know, there's a lot of discussion in today's, leadership gurus about authenticity. We're now teaching authenticity, how to be authentic. I mean, just saying that sounds unauthentic, inauthentic, right? Just saying that makes it sound like we're being fake. Let's teach somebody how to be real, right? What are the techniques of authenticity? What? However, I would say this. People are longing for authentic leaders, for sure, that are real. So how do I do that? The way that I think that you do that is you understand what authenticity is. Authenticity is just, I am what I say I am. And I'm consistently that over a period of time. As long as a person is consistently over a period of time what they say they are, then you'll accept them and you'll trust what they say. The beauty of this, the beauty of saying those three relevant or the three questions of buy-in before you start, or asking yourself the three questions of buy-in before you start. How are we going to prove that it's relevant? How do we make sure we're of quality, or how do we convey that this will be a quality initiative or this will be of quality? And how can we explain to them the positive or negative impact? It forces me to be authentic. It forces me to do to say what we're going to do and then follow up and do it. It forces me to, or at least puts me on the right road to do so. So for you as an executive leader, for me as an executive leader, we can gain from Pericles because Pericles was really good at showing the relevance. He was really good at talking quality and doing quality, and he was really good at showing Athenians what the impact was of their actions or their inaction. When all those Athenians showed up on the battlefield of Marathon and changed the very course of history that day. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go Google it. Because if those Athenians hadn't won the day on the battlefield of Marathon, we wouldn't have a free society. Because the democracy that was just starting to emerge, the flower was just starting to bloom, if the Persians would have won that battle that day, there would be no democracy. And our life and our world would be completely different. But those couple thousand or whatever it was, Athenians that showed up, they bought in. Because there was more Persians, a lot more Persians, a lot more Persians. They say that the arrows were so thick they blocked the sun. But somehow, the Hippolytes, farmers, showed up and gave their all. Now, you know what's funny? That's not a unique story. You think about just the birth of, for those of you that are in the United States, not to my Canadian friends, you won the Battle of 1812, right? We'll say that. You guys you and General Brock won the Battle of 1812. That's for all my Canadian friends. But doesn't that sound very similar to the birth of the United States? A bunch of guys and gals bought in. Could it be because they showed the relevance, the potential positive impact, and how what they were going to try to do had some quality that had not been seen before? Could be. Could be. But when you roll this out in your department, you know what you're going to face? You're going to face three things. You're going to face againstism. Now, what's againstism? So you know you're going to face againstism. And againstism is this. I'm against it. I'm against it. And the strategy of those that deploy againstism is, if they just are against it long enough, you'll give up. I'll just be against it long enough and you'll quit trying to do this thing. And then all of us look around and go, hey, whatever happened to that thing we were trying to do? Oh, everybody was against it. And it ended. So we know when we talked about change, we know that there's going to be a group of resistors, right? It's completely unrealistic to think everybody's going to be on board. So the resistors oftentimes deploy against-ism. We're against, we're against, we're against, we're against, we're against, we're against, we're against. So what do I got to do? Somehow I got to get the reasonable people on board. Remember we talked about that, the 5 reactions to change. Early riser, early adapter, the crowd, legitimizer, and the resistor. Well, I just got to get three of those, the reasonable people. The 60%, 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%. I just got to get 60%, the reasonable people. So how do I combat against-ism? Well, for me, I combat against-ism by showing the relevance. Well, that's great. I appreciate that you're against it. But to all you reasonable people, let me show you why it's so relevant to you. Let me show you why it's so important to you. So the only way to combat against-ism in the court of public opinion, in my perspective, is that I've got to be able to clearly articulate why this is so relevant to them personally. Then the other one that we might come against, the other malady that we might come against, is what I call debatification. Debatification. This too is deployed by resistors. See, debatification is this. I'm just going to debate it to death. I'm going to argue with you and 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 argue with you, because eventually I will just debate it to death. That is similar to my 10-year-old Mia. That is her strategy that she deploys, and she's quite good at it. And I can honestly say that she has won a couple of those battles, but I will win the war. What do you mean? Well, you know, you've dealt with kids before, right? They're just going to keep coming at you. Wear you down, wear you down, wear you down, wear you down. And it's been the end of a long work day, and you finally say, I don't care, you can play with your iPhone. Or I don't care, you can eat bonbons till midnight. I don't care. Do whatever you want. Go ask your mom. She told me to ask you. Okay, I don't care. Do whatever you want. Debatification. So how do I get reasonable people, as they're hearing the debate from the resistors, how do I get them on side? How do I get them to buy in? I'm not going to get the resistor to buy in. My only goal is just to get the resistor to shut up. Remember, we talked about that way back in being an agent of change. How do I get the person in the red zone just to move to yellow? Just get them to be quiet. We already talked about that. But the way that I'm going to win the debate is I'm going to show that impact. And I'm going to be able to show it in real and meaningful terms. I'm not trying to convince the resistor. I'm not going to convince the resistor. It is 100% unrealistic to think 100% of the people will be on board. I don't need 100% of them to be on board. I just need that reasonable group to be on board. And I need the resistor just to be quiet. So that reasonable group, when the debate happens, I'm going to clearly be able to articulate impact. Here's the impact if we do positive. Here's the impact if we don't negative. Then finally, I call it plotting-itis. Have you ever met somebody that the whole time you're talking, all they're doing is plotting ways to stop you? Or the whole time you're talking, all they're doing is they're not listening to a word you're saying. All they're doing is coming up with a pithy response. You ever met that person? I've met that person many times. I love those kind of people. They crack me up. Because they didn't hear anything you say. Because they're spending their whole time trying to figure out a way to make you look bad or say something or whatever. Plotting-itis. People actually plotting to derail the thing you want to do. Not taking the time or energy to come up with a new plan, but plotting against yours. What's the only way to come against them in the court of reasonableness? In my opinion, a track record of quality. Because as they're plotting, other people are like, dude, give it a rest. I trust what they're doing. They've done it well before. I'm good with it. They've shown me the relevance. They've shown me the potential impact, good or bad. And I trust it because it's gone well before. Well, what if we don't have a track record? Well, then you have to open the door to the person who's plotting. Because they can say, well, look where this didn't go well, and 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 this didn't go well. Why do you think it's going to go well? And the reasonable people go, well, you got a good point. So you got to give ammunition to the reasonable people in the group. So what you have to be able to say is you preemptively say, hey, I know in the past maybe this initiative and that thing didn't go so well. But we've learned from that, and here are the adjustments we've made. And as long as that's true, as long as that's a true statement, then people will give you a chance. Because they can't believe how transparent you're being. And they say to themselves, well, that was kind of unique. He admitted a mistake, or she admitted a mistake. So for me, we know that there's going to be a group of resistors. And we know they're going to deploy 3 strategies: against-ism, debatification, plotting-itis. And so the buy-in, thoughts, proactively asking myself the buy-in questions prepares me for what I know is going to happen. I just know it's going to happen. All right, moving on. Now, we'll have more talk about buy-in, and that's the beauty of 3 weeks, right? That's the beauty of 3 weeks. Now I want to talk about delegation. And we might not get to pride, but we're going to take a whole week on pride. We're going to take a whole week on pride, so you don't have to worry about it. You're going to get an email from me every day about pride. Delegation. You know, I don't think you can have a more, maybe the number 2 tool in your toolkit today to be an effective leader is delegation. Number 1, the capacity to change. Number 2, effective delegation. Why? Because there's not enough time, energy, or effort to get done everything you want to get done. Why don't we delegate effectively? Well, usually it's because we don't have a process or a system. And then secondly, it's because people screw things up. If you're in a mayor-driven community, you don't want to get a call from the mayor about how your department screwed things up. If you're in a city manager, or in Canada, a CAO-driven community, you don't want to get a phone call from one of those people. You don't want to get a phone call from a counselor. You don't want to get a phone call from another agency about how your department screwed something up, or from a citizen directly. You don't want to get stopped at the grocery store because you live in a rural community and everybody knows who you are and your department screwed something up because you delegated it out. Poor delegation sounds like this. I didn't know you wanted me to do that. Or how about this? I can't believe you didn't do that. Or how about this? I can't believe you did that. Or how about this? I can't believe you won't let me do this. Those all are words that are manifestations of poor delegation. So, what I'm about to go through right now, I think, is a winning formula for effective delegation. Because it takes into consideration that some of the people that work for you aren't good at certain things. So you can't delegate those out. So there's only 2 ways to get things done. You're going to do it, I'm going to do it. Well, what about in between? So we have to have a process, a system for managing the in-between. I call it, if you know anything about technology, defragging your life. This system I'm about to walk through with you and that we'll review on Monday morning defrags your life. Now, truth be told, I have no idea where this came from. It's been so long that I've been using this that I can't remember if I made it up or if I stole it from somebody else. So, whoever you are out there, if you invented this, I give you full credit, even though I don't know who you are. So, like the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, the unknown developer of this, if it is true that I didn't develop it, then it's yours, baby. But I may have. I don't remember. I just remember that I was buried. I had 41 direct reports at one time because we had laid a bunch of mid-level leaders off, and all of a sudden everybody reported directly to me as an executive leader, and I was buried. So I had to find a way to win. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to take everything that one of your direct reports does or is responsible for, and you're going to list it on a whiteboard, on a chalkboard, on a white piece of paper, I don't care. And you're going to sit down with them, and here's how you're going to start. You're going to start by saying this: I have done a poor job with you because sometimes I'm in your face when I don't need to be, and sometimes I'm not around when you need me. I have done a poor job. Now remember, coming in low like that is going to set the tone for the conversation. They're going to be open. If you come in and say, I'm going to try to figure out a way for you to do more stuff, that's going to be fundamentally rejected like this. But instead, you're going to say, hey, look, I probably could have been delegating with you better. There's some times I should have been here for you that I wasn't, and there was some times that I didn't need to be in the meeting and I was stepping all over you. So we're going to get that worked out right now. This form of delegation is all based on proficiency. That's all it's based on. So I'm going to be with my direct report when they need me so I can support them and guide them and grow them. And I'm not going to be around when they have proficiency. So we're going to stop the bus and take the time to clarify that. And that's going to be formal so that we know each other in a covenant between us. So I'm going to take everything that that direct report does and write it down. And then together, we're going to go through and categorize each thing that they do based on proficiency. Where they have high proficiency, I'm going to leave them alone. Where they have low proficiency, I'm going to be there to help. So all of a sudden, I'm going to create a system that mitigates my risk but increases my effectiveness. A force multiplying catalytic tool. And it will get them to take greater responsibility because it clarifies where they have the authority to do so. And it reminds them where they have the authority, where they don't have the authority to do so. So, we're going to make the list. And then we're going to go through and we're going to pull out the things where they have low proficiency. Where they haven't showed, where they don't have any experience, where they don't have any whatever. Thank you, Jeff, for putting those down on the bottom of the screen. Levels of authority. So, we're going to go through first and identify the things that they have low proficiency. Either they don't have the experience, they don't have the knowledge, they haven't done it well a couple of times, whatever. Because even there's some areas where you have low proficiency. We all do. We're going to take those and we're going to put them in a bucket. That's a very scientific term, a bucket. We're going to put them in a bucket. And that bucket we're going to call ask and recommend. That's the ask and recommend bucket. So, okay, Joe, in these areas over here, you're not going to take off and just start running. You're going to come to me and talk to me about it before you do. I'm mitigating my risk. Now notice, ask and recommend. You're still going to do it. I'm not going to do it. You're going to do it. But you're going to talk with me about it. You're going to talk about your plan, your strategy, your timelines, whatever. You're going to talk with me about it, then you're going to do it. And oh, by the way, you're not just going to come and dump it on me and ask me to solve it for you and go be a robot and do it. You're going to come to me with a recommendation. You're going to tell me how you would approach it. Now, why? Because I'm going to try to grow this person to take greater responsibility. All right, there'll be some things left on your sheet there. And now we're going to go through and pick out the things where they have some proficiency. Some proficiency. And we're going to drop those in a bucket that we're going to call ACT, A-C-T, and report immediately. Oh, you can go do it. You don't need to talk to me. You can go do it, but I want to know that you did it right away. Because you have some proficiency. Some. And I still want to be in the loop. Now, the idea here is that they're going to go do it. They're not asking you about it. They're going to tell you what went on so that you're catching it in time that if there was a mistake, you could still rectify it before it becomes a big mushroom cloud and you get that phone call from whoever it is you don't like to get phone calls from. There'll be some stuff left. The stuff that is left, you're going to go through and you're going to identify where they have good proficiency. Good proficiency. Where they have good proficiency, you're going to drop it into the third bucket. The third bucket, act and report periodically. You go do it, you go for it, no big deal. Just keep me in the loop in our monthly meeting, in our quarterly meeting, whatever. We have stated goals. You know what to do in this area. You go do it. Just keep me in the loop periodically. Again, why? Keep your hand on the pulse. Then there's going to be some stuff left. Anything left, obviously they have mastery of. And because they have mastery of it, it goes in the final bucket. The final bucket, you know what it's called? Act on own. Don't talk to me. Don't expect me to be in the meeting. I fully and completely trust you, and you have shown me mastery of that. Go for it. Now, what does that do? Well, I guarantee you right now that I guarantee you, you'll pick up 2 hours in your week just right there. Because you're only going to be involved in those areas you need to be. Act on own. In those areas you need to be. Ask and recommend. That's the only area you're going to be in. So you're no longer going to be sitting in meetings where you're sitting there going, why am I sitting in this meeting? Or saying to yourself, how come I didn't know about that meeting? Because everything's based on proficiency. Look at what it sets up. I'm here for you, but I'm also not going to be around where you don't need me. I will be deeply involved. I will leave you alone. And the clarity of what's in between. Defragged your life. So now with this direct report, I've got to be there for 2 or 3 things. For that direct report, I'm only going to be there for 1 thing. For this direct report, I got to be there for 5 things. Instead of 10, 10, and 10, I'm now all of a sudden I'm only there for 9, 3, 1, and 5. Now it's got to be a living, breathing document, right? It's got to be living and breathing. So that thing becomes a covenant. It's how we're going to do business with each other. It's got to be living and breathing because we've got to regularly evaluate it. I think it's better than a performance review because it's mutually agreed upon with real-time evaluation and performance evaluation. And it works off the premise that I trust you. So let's pick out the things you're proficient in. Let's identify the things you're not so proficient in. And let's grow you to be more proficient. Because obviously what we're trying to do is move people from what? Ask and recommend to act on own. Or as close as we can get them to act on own as possible. While you've still mitigated the risk that they're going to screw it up. I don't like your delegation matrix. I don't like your levels of authority. I don't like you. I don't care. I just know this. In today's day and age, you better have some tangible, sequential, explainable way you delegate. Why? So you can teach it. Because it's not enough for you just to be a great delegator. Your direct reports need to be great delegators. And their direct reports need to be great delegators all the way down. Because delegation is that valve. So as an executive leader, creating a culture, if you want to enhance operational efficiencies, then the way to get more done with less, delegation. Effective delegation. Where I unleash human capital, but mitigate my risk of getting phone calls. By keeping control of those few things that people need to ask and what? Recommend. But because they're asking and recommending, I'm constantly teaching, they're going to be growing. Because eventually they're going to come to me 3 times in a row. I plan to do it this way. Yeah, that's fine. I plan to do it this way. You're great. Yeah, I plan to do it this way. That was awesome. You know what? You don't need to come and ask me anymore. You're good. I can see now that you have gotten some proficiency. Just report to me periodically on that. And that's what I mean by living, breathing document. So they're not going to stay and ask and recommend unless you're a knothead. If you're any kind of a teacher, you're going to teach them and grow them from ask and recommend to act and report immediately, or act and report periodically, or eventually act on own. They should already know how to do that. You're living in a fantasy world, dude. There's a reason you're the director. Because you're good. And if they were as good as you, they would have your job. So there's obviously something you can teach them or grow them, or some areas where they need to enhance their proficiency. And just like there's probably some areas that they could teach you. So in enhancing their proficiency, you then take more and more off your plate. That, what I just described, is being a catalyst for responsibility. In a manageable, organized, sequential, and effective way. I just got Joe to take greater responsibility by growing him into that responsibility within the context of the daily operation. And I got their buy-in. How did I get their buy-in? Because when I walk in, I'm going to say, you know what, man? I have been in your face when I shouldn't have been, and I haven't been there when you needed me. That's going to change today because I got a system. The chubby brown man, that's me. The chubby brown man has come up with a system for me, and I'm going to start, and we're going to start using the system, and it's mutually agreed upon and proficiency based. Oh, you're going to leave me alone? But you're going to be here where I need you? Yeah. Well, that's relevant to me. That could make an impact. And although I question the quality of it because we've had a bumpy road sometimes, I'll give you a shot. Buy-in. Then we deploy it. So just remember, it's got to be a living, breathing tool. Now, what about the other way? What if they've stumbled and fallen, stumbled and fallen, stumbled and fallen, stumbled and fallen? then that allows me to go back and say, you know what? This was an ask, act, and report periodically. I want to move that back for a little bit so you and I get on the same page again. And if you've done it right up until that point, it'll be like this. Yeah, you're probably right. I need to spend a little bit more time with you on those. So, delegation. Are you personally an effective delegator? Are those that you lead effective delegators? And do you have a department that's effective at being a catalyst for responsibility through an effective delegation strategy? And if you don't like mine, I'm good with that, but go get one and make sure that it's linear, make sure that it's well articulated so that it can be taught, so that the whole department is really great at delegation. Okay. We've got 1.5 minutes. We have 1.5 minutes, Jeff? Yeah. So all I'm going to do is read this quote about pride to set up, not next week, but the following week, because we're going to take 4 days in 5-minute, 6-minute videos over a 4-day period to talk about pride. Pride is an intangible force that drives human capital unlike any other. Investing time and energy into building both organizational and individual pride will provide greater dividends than any other tool in a leader's toolkit. Building organizational pride leads to higher morale, increased participation in problem solving, and a sense of ownership that creates the department is a reflection of me kind of attitude. Building individual pride leads to exceeded job expectations, greater ownership of the employee's specific task, and the employee regularly innovates, and a less stressful workplace. Who said that? Archimedes? Deming? Could it be Pericles? No. It was the chubby brown man, Ian Hill. What's my point? My point is I want you to think about that. The challenge is how do we instill pride, use it, and maximize its benefits throughout the organization? What are the systems and strategies to employ and deploy this powerful force, and how to use it to improve performance? That's what we're going to talk about, not next week, but the following week, and in our coaching session. We're going to talk about this pride thing. How do I increase how do I instill and deploy pride as a performance management tool? Catalyst for responsibility. I do think we can learn from Pericles, because somehow he got those Athenians to give their all. And you probably have known people, and you may have known how to do it as well. But now we've got to formalize it, put some words to it, put some structure to it, so we can teach it. And whether that's buy-in, or whether that's delegation, or whether that's building a culture of pride, we've got to be able to have words to these things so we can teach it down line. And that's how we create organizational culture. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all you do. You make a significant difference in every citizen within the confines of your purview. You touch every citizen from cradle to grave, you and your department, and I thank you for it. Take care, everybody.